Greg Morgan, tōko ingoa. My name's Greg Morgan and I work for Auckland Council. It's my privilege to host tonight's webinar. Welcome and thank you for joining us. This is a webinar on the 10-year recovery budget, and our theme tonight is water quality. As we will hear shortly, the recovery budget is proposing to extend the water quality targeted rate to provide additional funding for a range of initiatives that will enable improvements to water across Tamaki Makaurau. We're joined by a panel of councillors and staff experts who will answer questions and share ideas for you to consider as you're shaping up your feedback on the budget consultation. And so welcome to the panellists this evening. Councillor Richard Hills, who's Chair of the Environment and Climate Change Committee, welcome. Councillor Pippa Coombe, Deputy Chair of that committee, welcome to you, Councillor. Councillor Desley Simpson, who's Chair of the Finance and Reporting Committee, welcome. And Councillor Linda Cooper, welcome to you. We have my colleague Andrew Chin with us. Andrew is the Council's Head of Healthy Waters Strategy. And Andrew Duncan will probably pop in later. He's the Manager of Financial Policy. So tēnā koutou, welcome. Thank you for being here this evening. Now to get us underway, we'll show a short video on behalf of the Mayor, and then that will be followed by a scene-setting presentation delivered by Andrew Chin. And Andrew will sketch out the options that are under consultation right now. That's going to be followed by our Q&A session. People watching, please type your questions into the Q&A window. The session's going to be recorded and made available via our website, along with all the questions and answers. And all up, the session's going to take around 90 minutes. So here we go to get us underway, the video on behalf of the Mayor. Thank you.
This year is the year of recovery from COVID-19. We stopped the spread of the disease, but the economic impact and hit on council revenue was real. This 10-year budget is about how we get the best outcomes for Auckland. It will provide for our city's future while keeping our rates increases low compared to other growth cities in New Zealand. We'll help Auckland's economy recover, support our communities, build water and housing infrastructure, and improve our transport network. We'll continue to make progress on cleaning up our beaches and streams and on our long-term response to climate change. Auckland Council is forecast to take a $1 billion revenue hit because of COVID-19. This budget aims to find a balance between investing in our city and not overburdening our residents. We need your feedback on these issues and how we pay for them. To have your say, go to akyoursay.nz/recovery budget and tell us what you think of our plans for the future of Auckland.
I just received a message from somebody that the sound quality is not very good, so I've tried another mic. So if somebody wouldn't mind dropping a message back saying it's better or worse or about the same, that would be really great. And so thank you for being on this webinar, which is on the subject of water quality and in terms of the 10-year recovery budget. Remember that you can type your questions into the Q&A window and they'll be picked up and given to panelists who will be answering them and using your questions as the basis for conversation. So I'm getting signals that the sound quality is better now. If something happens to it, please send me a message. I'm going to hand over to Andrew now. Andrew, who is the Head of Healthy Water Strategy, who's going to present to us on the options that are being consulted on right now regarding water quality, and then we'll move into the Q&A. So thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Greg, and good evening, everyone. Marina, if you can click onto the next slide. So the discussion tonight is around the water quality targeted rate. The water quality targeted rate first got implemented in the last LTP about 2.5 years ago. And we've got a number of programs that are currently in progress and underway. In this LTP, there's two questions that we're consulting on. One is the proposal to extend the water quality targeted rate through to 2031. And the other one is to increase the water quality targeted rate and extend it. So increasing the water quality targeted rate at the same level as general rates. And the table that you can see in this slide really shows you the differences in the level of investment that means. So the status quo is where we are currently, and if there's no change, that's the investment profile that council will undertake. If the water quality targeted rate is extended, there's additional funding and investment that will be available, but it will be available from years 2029 through to 2031. So we'd keep doing the same kind of work that we're doing now, but we'd only be able to start the new projects beyond 2029. Finally, the option where we increase the water quality targeted rate by the same proportion as general rates and extend it, that enables us to do more from day one. So we can start new projects and new programs from next financial year. Marina, if you can click me onto the next slide, please. So what would those projects and programs be? So under the current water quality targeted rate, we've got a number of programs that are underway. The biggest of those is called the Western Isthmus Water Quality Improvement Program. It's not listed here because that's a fully funded program under the existing targeted rate. If we had additional funding, both in the extension and in the increase plus extension, we would do more under all of the existing regional programs. So that's the Rural Stream Rehabilitation Program, On-Site Wastewater, Safe Networks Program, and the Contaminant Reduction Programs. We would also introduce 2 additional new programs. The Southern Catchments Alignment Program, focused on catchments of the Manukau Harbour and the Tamaki Estuary, and a new program called the Eastern Isthmus Program. And I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail on what they look like in the following slides. Marina, if you can click it on, please. So the Southern Catchments, like I said, focused on the Manukau and the Tamaki Estuary catchments. On the next slide, the type of projects that we would do under a Southern Catchments Alignment Program, it's all about looking at other major infrastructure that's going in and investing at the same time so that we leverage major land use change or transportation projects so that we can do more than minimum when it comes to offsetting the effects of those projects. An example here is the Puanui Stream catchment. This catchment is going through some pretty significant housing intensification driven by Kāinga Ora, and also the Manukau Centre is being upgraded, and the Puanui Stream runs through all of these, and there's a wonderful opportunity to invest in improving and restoring the Puanui Stream as these housing developments are moving and going underway. On the next slide, there's also some really significant transport projects forecast in the next decade. Many of you may have heard of the Mill Road corridor that starts from Manukau and finishes in Drury. Waka Kotahi, or the old New Zealand Transport Agency, is building this road in the next decade. It crosses quite a number of stream catchments, the Puanui, Papakura, Slippery Creek, Hangaia streams and the Ngakaroa. When they cross those streams, we have an opportunity to leverage the transport investment, building bigger wetlands, refurbishing longer lengths of the stream at the same time as the transport project is being delivered. So we get better outcomes, but we can deliver them very efficiently. Finally, another major transport program that is forecast in the next decade is the Southern Gateway Program. That's on the next slide, please, Marina. You may have heard of the Airport to Botany project and a rapid transit system that is planned to go from the airport through Puanui, the Manukau Centre, and all the way up to Rākau Drive to the Botany Town Centre. This is a major infrastructure investment, and once again, as these roads are made bigger, widened, building their own stormwater mitigations, we can complement that investment with additional funds to do more than minimum and provide a bigger catchment benefit. On the next slide, the Eastern Isthmus Program. Now, I spoke very early on about the Western Isthmus Program, and in the image on the left-hand side of your screen, the yellowy coloured catchment area is the Western Isthmus. And the program is really based around the old areas of Auckland that had combined sewers. Combined sewers are where the stormwater goes into the wastewater pipes. And the problem is that during heavy rain, when the stormwater and the wastewater are all in the same pipe, the wastewater pipes cannot take all of that flow, and they overflow into the streams. So pretty much every time it rains at the moment, these wastewater pipes will overflow because of the stormwater. Watercare, with separate funding, is building the Central Interceptor project. And this is really the cornerstone of both these programs, because when the Central Interceptor is being built, it enables us to replumb these catchments so that they don't overflow so often. So this investment is largely around separating the stormwater from the wastewater stream. We will be building new stormwater pipes and disconnecting private properties connections into the wastewater network into these new stormwater pipes so that we do not inundate the sewers and create the overflows. The image on the right hand side is the Eastern Isthmus, and all of those red squares show you the locations of where those sewer overflows occur. This is the biggest portion. The Western and Eastern Isthmus is the biggest water quality problem in Auckland. And this is why we prioritise most of the investment here. So whenever it rains, it overflows. There's a lot of beaches around here, and there's quite a high public health risk when people use these beaches after it rains. So just so everyone knows, this is the lion's share of the project. However, we're very conscious that there are water quality issues in the rest of the region. And one of the things we're excited about in this current proposal is our ability to increase the level of investment in the other regional programs. So if you click onto the next slide, Marina. Oh, sorry, this just goes into a little bit more detail on the Eastern Isthmus. The pink lines there show the wastewater pipes that would be built, and the green lines sort of show the new stormwater pipes that would be built and the catchments and the areas they are in. But as you can see, it stretches all the way from the CBD, Parnell, Hobson Bay, St Heliers, all the way through down to Parnell and along the Tamaki estuary. So it's quite a significant program of works. And I should just qualify now, while I remember, this is going to take much longer than 10 years to do. The important thing is getting started early. The earlier that we start, the sooner we'll receive the benefits of these projects. So on the next slide, Marina. Yes, the other regional programs. So stream rehabilitation, this is both in urban and rural areas where we work with landowners to enable stock exclusion, riparian planting, really trying to address one of the major problems in our rural and urban catchments about stream erosion. And stream erosion is one of the major sources of sedimentation in our harbours and estuaries. And it's that sedimentation that drives the prolific mangrove growth and impacts our marinas and our ability to use those waterways for recreation and amenity. On the next slide. Now this project, contaminant reduction, we're quite excited about being able to deliver quite a number of these pollutant traps around the region in many of the suburbs in the North Shore, out down south, Papakura, Manuera. These gross pollutant traps capture quite a large amount of the fine sediments, and in particular, a lot of the floating litter. So we target these kind of devices where we've got land uses that generate a lot of litter and surface contamination, because we know that seeing all of those floating debris that come out of our stormwater drains is one of the real bugbears of the community when they walk along our beaches. On the next slide, we've got our on-site wastewater program. While most of the region, or most of the residents in Auckland are connected to Watercare's wastewater system, we've still got about 50,000 residents that have their own septic tank systems. And we really haven't, and historically haven't had a systematic way of making sure that people's private on-site wastewater systems are regularly maintained and kept up to a good working standard. And there are a number of locations, such as Waiheke Island, Piha, Bethells Beach, where you've got relatively high density communities on on-site wastewater, where we're also getting problems with no swimming signs because of the runoff from poorly maintained on-site wastewater systems. On the next slide, Safe Networks. Now this has been a very successful program that really focuses on those newer suburbs, such as the North Shore, along the Takapuna, up to, all the way up to the Hibis, and they already had separated systems. But over the years, there's been a lot of very poor plumbing. People have connected, even though there's separate systems available, they've connected their roof to the wastewater, and quite a few cases where they've connected their wastewater directly to the stormwater. You can see in the bottom left picture there, one of the sites where we found a washing machine that was connected straight to a stormwater connection. Now that resulted in this foamy water pouring out over Takapuna Beach, and also triggers, beach closures. So the Safe Networks program is really about investigating, putting cameras up the pipes, taking samples and tracking down where these illegal connections have been made and working with the landowners to stop them. So all of these regional programs under option 3, where we can increase the water quality targeted rate and extend it, we can increase our effort and speed at which we deliver these programs from year 1. And I think that's my final slide, Marina. So happy to pass it back to you, Greg, for some more questions.
Thanks very much, Andrew. And the presentation as well is going to be made available on the website. Now, just a word to everybody watching. Please don't raise your hand to ask a question. Please type it into the Q&A function, into the window, which you'll find at the bottom of the screen. It says Q&A and a couple of little speech bubble kind of things. If you could type in, please, we do need to get the questions that way. So just as you're doing that, I'd like to ask our panelists in turn to share briefly just their sense of kind of water-related priorities that they would like people to think about as they are having their say on the 10-year budget. So just a couple of top-of-mind priorities to get us underway. So Councillor Hills, could we start with you, please?
Yeah, kia ora everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. It's good to see people signing on after work. The water quality targeted rate, I guess we'll focus on that because that's what we're here for, but we want everyone to submit and get their friends and whānau to submit on the whole plan. And it's important that we get a range of views from all people right across Tamaki Makaurau and all ages and backgrounds too, to help us make our decisions. On the water quality targeted rate, I just will briefly say how successful it's been so far, just on the North Shore, especially with the Safe Networks. I think one of the first projects, Takapuna Beach, they basically looked through all the pipes going house to house, business to business, found with over 400 and something houses had smoke testing done. I went out and watched some of it happening. It was extremely, really close one by one. Some of the public infrastructure was fixed straight away. There was something like 40 quite serious issues that were found, mostly due to private infrastructure. So that's where stormwater was plumbed into wastewater accidentally, or wastewater was plumbed into the stormwater either accidentally or on purpose. Those issues were fixed fairly fast. Some of the private residents obviously had to pay to get their own networks upgraded pretty quickly. And we've seen a significant increase in water quality outcomes for Takapuna Beach and less beach closures. And that has happened up the coast as well. So Milford South has had all the outfalls and everything checked there, and it's looking good. Castor Bay, I think it's 850 households have been gone through already, and 35 problems have been found. 19 have been fixed, and 12 abatement notices have gone to residents who need to get issues fixed. So it is a long process, and it takes a lot of really smart people to be doing that work, but that has all been funded through the the water quality targeted rate. And so we want to see this type of exercise being spread across as much of the city as possible, and that small increase, about $3 a year for the average property this year, will mean that we can ramp up some of that work. So that's probably all I'll focus on for now. There'll be questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. We'll come to you, Councillor Simpson. Top of mind priorities from you, please.
Look, I don't think there's any doubt that my priority is just to increase water quality across the region, full stop, capital letter. But as a councillor from the Ōrākei ward and the councillor that has both the Ōrākei local board and the Waitemata local board within their ward area, my direct focus is the Eastern Isthmus project. We have health warnings around Hobson Bay and around some of our northern beaches, which are joined by many, many people from throughout the region. I mean, people come to Mission Bay, they're not just locals, they're regional people that, people from outside just our local board area, and they come to visit the beaches there. And we want those beaches swimmable. The other thing is we've invested in access to the water programs like kayak launching pads and things, only to find that people now cannot use them. In fact, the health warnings don't even let the dogs go in the water. It's so bad within the Hobson Bay area that it's millions above a target for E. coli and feces, and it's a real health risk. And, if we want to be a fantastic city, we cannot afford to have this kind of water quality right in the middle of the city. So that's my focus. And I think the big question we have to ask Aucklanders are you prepared to wait 6 years before anything starts on that project? Because that's the plan at the moment. I mean, the original Merrill proposal had nothing happening there for 6 more years. And, I went to the mayor and asked if he would look at an amendment to his proposal, and it was unanimously supported by every councillor and the mayor himself to actually give Aucklanders a bit of an option to start this extra work. And it's not just for the Eastern Isthmus, but as Andrew has alluded to, it's for the Manukau, and in fact, every part of Auckland will benefit if that extension and increase occurs. But my absolute priority, Eastern Isthmus, Hobson Bay and the Northern Beaches. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, I should have introduced you as the chair of the Regulatory Committee, so apologies for that. I failed to do that.
I thought you did. That was okay. Kia ora koutou.
Top of mind priorities from you, Councillor.
That's right. Kia ora koutou, everybody. Welcome to everybody who's come onto this call. I think my Waitakere ward has both the Manukau and Waitemata on it, and we're not also that far from the Kaipara. So I see the priority. I hear people saying we want our streams and we want our water where our kids can swim, we can use. For example, we spent, along with the Te Whao Pathway Trust, over $1 million on a pontoon on the Whau River. And so, we're building the infrastructure, but we want to be able to use these waterways. The other thing I've seen is that we've had a lot of people saying, are you just doing something on the Waitemata with the Interceptor project? Well, we have been doing work also on the Manukau, and we've secured a huge amount of multi-million-dollar investment from the government on the Kaipara, along with council money. But with this, if you support a 5% increase in the rates, we can get on and do a lot more work on the Manukau. And if you look at the development that's going in the Manukau, I mean, in lots of ways, the biodiversity has been destroyed over time in Manukau in terms of tree cover. This is a chance to clean up those waterways and for the new people going to live there. But also this contributes hugely for my people in my area to the Manukau, and a big part of the southern part of the Waitakere ward is the northern Manukau. And I know that people really love the beaches there, French Bay, Huia, Langholm, those places. And we've been able to lift with the Smart Swim project, lift a couple of permanent bans swimming there. So that is good, that's progress, but we need to invest more. And the original water quality targeted rate meant that a 30-year project could be reduced to 10. But without this 5% increase, because of our loss of revenue over COVID, it meant that could be delayed. So I'm really asking everybody, I think, to support the 5% so that we can do these things that all Aucklanders really want, and that is to have really beautiful waterways, good clean oceans so we can all swim and use them and enjoy them. We're not called the City of Sails or, you know, the isthmus surrounded by water to usable.
Kia ora, thank you, and good evening, everybody. Thank you to the attendees for joining this evening on this webinar. As the councillor for the central area of Auckland and the Gulf Islands, this water quality targeted rate is a massive priority to get across the line. We've seen the benefits in the Western Isthmus, and fortunately the residents there really got behind the targeted rate when it was first introduced, and we're starting to see some of the, well, a lot of that work program underway, and looking forward to the benefits of that being brought forward. And so I know very much joined with Councillor Simpson as well in terms of the Eastern Isthmus program, and wanting to see that work program being brought forward, because there's a huge level of concern about the quality of our streams and beaches. But of course that extends across the whole region. And I just wanted to make a comment in terms of this being a priority, is also as co-chair of the Hauraki Gulf Forum, we've had a lot of publicity in the last week, just about, you know, we've had this amazing race happening above the water, which is getting underway, but below the water, we've got species that are functionally extinct. The condition of the Gulf is really deteriorating, and we have to do something about it. And we're really putting the pressure on government around the marine protection, but the part that council can do is what we're putting into the Hauraki Gulf, whether it's sedimentation or pollution. So this investment is so important for us to be able to say that we're doing our part. We're doing as much as we can to ensure that all of our harbours are in the best possible, you know, that we're working towards the regeneration of all of our harbours, and for me particularly for the Hauraki Gulf. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Councillor. Thanks very much. Okay, let's move to some questions, and thanks for putting them into the Q&A window. That's appreciated. Keep them coming. So, Andrew, maybe you'd like to pick up this question, please. Why is the discharge of wastewater into stormwater? The problem does not occur in just heavy rain in the Western Isthmus.
I typed an answer there. So I think the big thing with the connections where there's wastewater connected straight to stormwater, the big problem is that you can have a discharge in dry weather when there's a higher likelihood of people swimming and using the beach for recreation. So those so-called dry weather discharges are actually very high risk, and they are in fact our highest priority because of the higher likelihood of someone getting into contact with the pathogens. So that's the key thing there. At least weather overflows, we don't like those either, but there's a lower likelihood of people recreating in the water at those times.
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. Anybody else want to comment on that, or we'll just move on to the next one? No. Well, you're on a roll, Andrew, so I'm going to ask you the second question. There maybe Councillor Hills would like to come in after it. What investment is going to be done to improve the water quality in the northern region, especially high density of Auckland population using the North Beaches, and so Milford, Browns Bay, Long Bay, Snells Beach, etc.?
So probably the key investment programs for the northern beaches will be the contaminant reduction program, where we're looking at the litter traps in particular and sediment traps in those existing areas. The northern catchments, they're already separated, and so the most effective program that we're finding there is expanding and accelerating safe networks, finding the illegal connections, and making sure that the separated system is as tight as we can get it.
Sure. Thank you very much. Councillor Hills, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, for the north, that was for the North Shore, the northern areas. So the biggest things we're doing is the Safe Networks, which has had a measurable result in Takapuna. We are pretty lucky that we do not have the combined sewer networks like other areas do, but we do have issues, and that's why the Safe Networks is doing such a good job at the moment, and that will continue and be ramped up with this rate. So with those smaller issues we've found in the Wairoa estuary, for instance, 851 homes and pretty good hit rate, only 35 had problems. 35 is still quite high. So what we do is either work with those local residents to fix those issues, or we put what unfortunately 12 people have had abatement notices, which means they have to address those issues really quickly, otherwise we can fine them. So that might be an illegal wastewater connection or broken pipes. Other issues that aren't necessarily related to the water quality targeted rate. In Mairangi Bay, which is slightly outside of my ward, the North Shore ward, there's a $15 million pump station being done this year, which is all about the Mairangi Bay, Castor Bay and the bays around there, making sure and reducing the overflows in that area of our coast. We also had a $30 million pump station built about 2 years ago in Fred Thomas in Takapuna, which not only provides for about 100,000 new dwellings, and that the stormwater and wastewater for that, it also has reduced the overflows into Shoal Bay from 20 overflows a year to no overflows a year. Hurstmere Road, there's the upgrade there, which looks like a street upgrade. What we've also done there is removed all the stormwater and put in rain gardens there, which will help with Takapuna as well. So that's what's been done so far, but we're also building on all of that to continue that work. And that's what SafeSwim was all about. SafeSwim helps show us the issues. It can give people real-time information. What people don't really realize is before SafeSwim is that we used to test the water. 48 hours later, we'd give the results and basically tell Aucklanders, oh, you shouldn't have swam in that beach 2 days ago. Now people can see it live. Often after heavy rain, that can be quite confronting for people, but we're actually trying to give people good information and address the issues we can with this water quality targeted rate.
Kia ora. Thank you. Does anybody else want to comment on that at all before we move on to the next question? No? Sure. All righty, let's go to the next one. What will be done to reduce the storm sewage overflow into the Manukau Harbour? So, Andrew, would you like to take this? And then maybe one of the councillors would like to comment.
So I think the key thing here is the long-term benefits of both the Western Isthmus program and the Eastern Isthmus program is a massive reduction in stormwater entering the wastewater system that all eventually ends up in Mangere. So by delivering those separation projects in the Western and Eastern Isthmus, we reduce the overall stormwater loads that find their way to Mangere. The network overall becomes more efficient and the overflows reduce as a result.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Councillor Cooper, would you like to talk about the pollution hotline maybe?
Yes, so we've got a hotline, and let me just find the number here. We've lost it in our message. So basically there's a 24-hour hotline where if you see any pollution in our waterways, you can call 377-3107. So that's open 24 hours a day. And that means if there's anything really urgent, our compliance people can go out and check it. So that's useful. And we also have what we call a graduated approach to enforcement. So if it's something minor, we can actually educate people, give them a warning, and then it goes up to if it's really bad, we can get straight in, ask them to stop any work and prosecute.
Sure.
So that's really what that is.
Thank you, Councillor. And that question came from a member of the Franklin Local Board, by the way. All right, on to another question. So this is labelled Hi Andrew, but we're making our subject matter expert work this evening, but of course other people may wish to comment as well. Western Isthmus program depends on the Central Interceptor and other water care work. On the 23rd of December, the Water Care Board decided to postpone $400 million of spending on Western Isthmus by 3 years. What are the implications and what work won't be done? When will the Western Isthmus program start again? And is this disconnected decision making? And can we be sure that the water quality targeted rate will be enough to complete the planned work in Western Isthmus program? Will the Eastern Isthmus program still be able to start in 2026?
Oh, that's a very detailed and difficult question. And look, in terms of the exact detail of what particular projects Watercare would prioritise and not, I just don't have the information. However, we are aware of it, and we are able to undertake works in the Western Isthmus that are in areas that don't require major water care investment. So there's areas that we can accelerate and get on with and still stick to program, such as Waterview. There's Herne Bay, and we've already started St Mary's Bay. So there's, in the interim, so as I understand it from Watercare, they're not proposing cancelling projects. There's just a period of deferral so that they can fit in the rest of their other capital program. In that time, we will make sure that we keep the momentum going on the Western Isthmus on those projects that don't require Watercare enabling works, and we can deliver independently. That's about as detailed as I can get, but like I say, we can probably take it offline if Elizabeth would like, and refer it straight to Watercare for a more detailed answer.
Sure. And thanks, Andrew. And just to let people know that if we skip over a question tonight, sometimes we just might miss a question. We certainly will get an answer to all questions and make sure that those answers go up on the website. So just be reassured on that. Okay, thank you, Andrew. Does anybody else wish to comment or move on to the next one?
I was just going to make a comment following on from Andrew, just saying that, I mean, it's important that we get a response from Watercare as well. But what's also important about this investment is that there's much closer alignment of the Watercare program and Healthy Waters, the council department, which I hope Andrew will agree that that is the case. And that wasn't always how it was in terms of Auckland Council and Watercare. So this has really come together, and the water quality targeted rate has been part of that, because I think it's forced everyone to really get into sync in terms of what the priorities are and what we've got to focus on. So I just wanted to throw that in, that it's another reason to kind of get behind this, because it helps everybody work together. But also, if there are questions that we can't answer, we've got to make sure that we follow up with Watercare.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That's valuable. I just had a message pop up on screen to say that a couple of participants had raised their hands. Remember, please, to type your questions into the Q&A window at the bottom of the screen. We're taking questions via typing into that function. Sometimes people wonder whether, when they're making feedback into a budget proposal, they have to stick within the questions that have been asked, or can they have other ideas? So I guess this question is along those lines. This may or may not be related to this consultation, but is Council considering giving ratepayers incentives to help the water quality effort? For example, setting up a reporting line to report polluters of our waterways. So,
yeah, well, I think we did have that hotline, didn't we, that I talked about before. So if somebody can type in that number to the Q&A, that would be really good. Or if does one of the moderators do that? But I think we do that. So I think we just encourage people to report that, because the sooner it's reported, the sooner we can get onto it and try to remedy whatever damage is being done or stop it continuing.
I guess the difference in that question, Councillor, is the incentive part. Someone has an idea about incentivising reporting.
I'm not sure whether that means people want to be paid to call that. I wasn't quite sure what that meant.
Yeah.
We would hope that you just use goodwill.
Thank you. Andrew, is there anything you'd like to say?
Greg, so I probably would mention, in terms of incentives, there is grant programs, particularly in the rural waterways space. So the water quality targeted rate assists with a number of local boards in waterways protection grants. And this is where farmers with high risk catchments are able to apply for a grant, but they have to put 50% of the costs of stock exclusion and riparian fencing up front, and the grant is there to pay the other 50% so that it incentivises that rural land use change.
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks very much. Okay. Will the safe networks be increased south and include commercial areas?
That's an easy question. Yes, we do operate in the south already. There's been a pretty significant safe networks investigation in Clark's Beach on the Manukau, and the industrial pollution prevention in commercial areas is certainly something that we'd love to extend that program into as well.
Sure. Thank you. And somebody has also asked that whether alongside safe networks, is there complementary publicity and education with plumbers and building inspectors?
Yes, but we can do better. Look, I'd say it's in its early stages at the moment. The building inspectors absolutely are well attuned to what's required, but we are working with the plumbing sector, really starting in this on-site wastewater space. So accrediting people to do proper on-site wastewater system inspections is one of the first steps. So we've developed a accreditation and a register, and then there's also a database to show where the on-site wastewater systems have been inspected and so forth. So that's really the kernel of where we want to take that sort of industry upskilling space.
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. Just to let you know, you might have seen typed back to you that number for the pollution hotline, 09377 3107, to report water pollution or a water quality issue. Councillor Hills, what's the plan for the Wairau estuary to remove sewage, for sewage to be removed from it soon?
Yeah, the Wairau estuary is one of the priorities. It has been one of the priorities, and it still is under the water quality targeted rate extension. So the safe networks is the biggest thing that we can do and the most important thing we can do in that site, because we don't have those big infrastructure issues that, say, the city centre isthmus does. So it's about testing all those pipes and all that infrastructure, private or public, and replacing it as soon as possible. That's happened. So again, I think it was 850 sites over the last year or so have been smoke testing and CCTV testing and different ways of looking through the infrastructure up in the Cast Bay Milford area. The Milford South has been found it's fine. The estuary itself is it's very complex. It's degraded. There's a marina in there, 210 boats with a false bottom that is freshwater. So the freshwater area and the salt crossing over each other doesn't have the flushing like other marinas around the city with salt water. So it does build up silt and the contaminants in that space. We're also going to continue that safe networks around the other side of the Milford and Wairau estuary part of the catchment, but it is one of the biggest catchments in Auckland. It stretches right up to where I live in Glenfield. Northcote includes, a lot of that coastline there, and so all of that is draining down, including the Wairau industrial area. One of the big projects that Andrew and the team are currently working on, and we've been meeting quite often on it, is the gross pollutant traps program. So there's a business case going forward on how we can get more of those big gross pollutant traps put in, especially in the industrial area, and to address issues there. There are also other things that aren't funded by the targeted rate, much like the Te Ara Awataha, the Awataha Greenway through Northcote there. There's a big housing development there, so Climate Order, the government, Panuku, Healthy Waters, and Mana Whenua are all working on that together to bring all that piped stream and piped river basically bed back into wetlands and natural streams, and that will help filter a lot of the water in natural ways. The other issues are very complex in the Wairau, because in the 70s and 80s they built these extremely big concrete channels right up hard against people's houses, and that was all about getting flooding away from houses. It was never designed to help with the water quality. So unfortunately, when it rains, we have the biggest rush of water that comes straight through that estuary, and It will be complex over time to sort, but it's about that constant intensive work through the catchment. I don't know if Andrew wants to talk anymore, but we are definitely on top of it. It's just not a magical fix or a big billion-dollar project that is going to fix the issues in the Waido.
Yeah, Richard, I totally agree. It's about making those incremental steps and maintaining the effort, and definitely the best opportunity in the next 3 years is those gross pollutant traps from those high litter generating areas. We certainly see that there's a number of good potential places in there, such as around the Glenfield Leisure Centre, that could really benefit from some of those traps.
Sure. Andrew, I was chatting to somebody today who said that there seems to be a lot more focus for water quality investment on the isthmus than the rest of the region. And is it fair that all Aucklanders contribute to the target rate, but most of the investment is on the isthmus? So I said I would ask the question. So here we go.
Yeah, and look, it comes up a lot. So like I said, this is the worst pollution spot in the region. And really the premise of the water quality targeted rate is that we all benefit from that investment. I myself, I live in rural South Auckland. However, I love to go fishing in the Waitemata Harbour. I'd love to take my kids snorkeling in the Hauraki Gulf. I know that the improvement in water, the worst sewer overflows that carry not just pathogens, but all the other nasty types of floaty things that don't degrade in our wastewater streams that get into our harbours, they permeate all throughout the Gulf and beyond. So really it's about an investment that will benefit us all. And for me, it's making sure we maintain the momentum and effort. We're only 2.5 years into the first stage of the water quality targeted rate, but we are in a marathon when it comes to water quality. We're not in a sprint. So we know we need to maintain public confidence that we are making progress. We are doing things visible in their neighbourhoods, and we just hope that we can maintain that confidence and people's willingness to keep paying the rate so that we can get there in the long run.
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. Councillor Cooper, would you like to comment on that?
Thank you, Greg. I wanted to comment because I feel that it's the politicians that make these decisions. We've got very clever staff that make recommendations, but in the end, we make the decisions on the priorities based on the information and the highest need and terms. And so to support Andrew, really, yes, the Central Interceptor does take the bulk of the money at the moment, and it will do for about another 3-4 years. We know that, we understand that, but as you've seen in Andrew's slides at the beginning about the projects that can be done further south and will extend to our other harbours. And so we knew that it does look like it's just in the centre, but we all tend to use it. People go to Mission Bay or they'll go into the city. And the thing is, we all feel proud of all of our moana around our region. And so we just need to chip away at all of them. And we wanted to start with that big Central Interceptor project because it was the one piece of infrastructure that had been left at amalgamation that was contributing to the worst pollution. So I hope that reassures you that we have got projects going out all over the region, but we do need, and some of them are alongside the Central Interceptor, but we need to get this big project done, and it gobbles up a lot of money, but it'll be worth it in the end.
Sure, it's an important topic, so let's just follow through to the other panelists. Councillor Simpson, would you like to add something?
Yes, I want to make sure, I want people to really understand that the increase to the water quality target rate, and I'll talk more about the finances a bit later, but the increase to the water quality targeted rate does not just benefit the isthmus. Every single local board area in Auckland will benefit from the increase to the water quality targeted rate. And what I want those people listening to do is to contact their local councillors and their local board members to find out the specifics of that investment in their area, because every local board has been sent the information on how they benefit from the increase and the extension. So I really, really want to make that really clear. Yes, we've got some mammoth big programs that can be funded earlier, and that's always a great thing to do. But I want to make it very clear that every single local board area will benefit from the increase and the extension to the water quality targeted rate. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Councillor. And Councillor Coombe?
Oh, thank you. I think it is a really good question, and other councillors have made great points. So I just wanted to add in a quick comment about how this is kind of one of the benefits of being a super city, that we can make regional investment, and we can all contribute and we all get the benefits across the region. And we can see that in other kinds of investments, like you might see the city centre rail link, think, oh, well, that's just happening in the city centre and I don't benefit because I live on the shore. Well, actually, it unlocks the whole region's network of transport, and it's going to provide a quicker connection for people coming from the shore, coming into town on the Northern Express and being able to get to the airport quicker. So it's that regional view of how we do our investment. And it can be frustrating because I know, like coming from the central city, is that there was huge underinvestment for many decades, and we're playing a lot of that catch up. So that's just part of, we can't keep shifting the cost onto future generations. We really need to make that investment now, and we definitely don't want to be like Wellington, where they've got poo coming out of the street because they didn't do this kind of investment when they should have. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, clear message back from my friend. Councillor Hills, is there anything you wanted to add into the conversation?
It's a bit of the same thing, I guess. For me, it's the Māori way of treating water. The why is one, like you put contaminants in the water down the road, it's going to end up in your backyard at some point. We know that, as Andrew was saying, things like sanitary products and condoms and all the other types of things from the Central Isthmus end up on our east coast beaches on the North Shore. We know that Little Shoal Bay, Birkenhead and Kennedy Bay, who don't have water quality issues coming out, get affected by the poor water quality sifting around in the Waitemata and up through the Upper Harbour. We know that that has really poor outcomes for not only human health, but for all the fish and animals that we have potential to see or not see in those areas as well. So it's kind of, we're all in this together, but actually when you think about it, the water is connected. It's not just my beach down there. We're actually pretty closely connected by our harbours, and every bit of extra investment right across Auckland helps all of us. So it's easy. Air quality is an easy one because we all breathe what people see is the same air, but water quality is the same. And I don't think many people see a fence up between your local board boundaries and never go into the others. And it swings and roundabouts. I know in the North Shore, we're getting quite a part of the natural environment quality target, the natural environment targeted rate, not quality. Too many meetings today, on the Kodi dieback and the tracks and the pest-free work, and some other boards would be getting more in other areas. So it's always about that priorities, but everyone gets a piece of so many of the different pies, but we all benefit in the end.
Sure, thank you very much. All right, let me just catch up with the new question. Actually, what I might do is ask Andrew Duncan, whether he'd like to say anything at this point. And Andrew, if you'd perhaps give an intro to yourself, and then if there's anything you'd like to add to that important conversation.
Good evening, I'm Andrew Duncan, Manager Financial Policy, provide advice on rates and development contributions. The key thing with a targeted rate, like the water quality targeted rate, is the revenue we raise from the rate can only be spent on the activity for which it's been raised. So all this money will go to fund the investments that the other Andrew's been talking about to deliver those broad benefits across the city. It's by putting this additional spending to ratepayers in the form of a targeted rate, gives them the strongest idea of where their additional funding would go. And through discussions like this, a really clear view of the benefits they can bring to the city.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, probably back to you, Andrew, to kick this one off. The Rural Waterways Protection Grants accelerate riparian work on private farmland to stabilise streams to improve water quality. Is there a role for a comparable grant for construction of stormwater reduction, e.g. rain gardens, green roofs, tanks, on private land in combined sewers to reduce stormwater entering the sewers and therefore overflow frequency? These old combined sewer areas also have no modern stormwater detention unless houses are new or extended.
So a grant scheme for the existing urban areas is not on the cards at the moment. Now we have looked at it, and in particular in the space of rainwater tanks. One of the first stages in the space, so rainwater tanks are just such an easy way to mitigate that stormwater runoff. And it's something that we all at the council and the governing body really wanted to encourage. But our first step has to be changing our planning rules and regulations so that you can install a tank as a permitted activity and you do not need a resource consent. Because when we first looked at the idea of, could we give someone a grant, if they had to spend a lot of that grant going back to council to get a resource consent to put in a rain tank, it's sort of taking from one hand and giving to the other. So you'll be pleased to know that the rain tank plan change is well underway. And I think that's the first stage. So we're looking at some of these enabling rules and regulations and standards first, so that we can then maybe raise the prospect of a grant, but it certainly hasn't been brought to the elected members at this stage, and it's not on the table at the moment.
Sure. Councillor Cooper or Councillor Hills, maybe, one of you, would you like to just explain again to make it clear for a layperson such as myself that the 5% increase is going to reduce the program overall? That's the time taken, is that right? I've got that right?
So the original premise for the water quality targeted rate was to move what was a 30-year plan of investments. So that's not fixing everything. That was the 30-year plan for investments across Tamaki Makaurau would be reduced because of the rapid, it was about 400 million, could push that down to a 10-year window for those investments. There was never going to fix every issue, but what we had got planned over that time, we were reducing down to 10. The 5% rise to the water quality targeted rate is about $3 per household. That won't reduce the timing of the overall plan. That will add to and do a whole lot more that we thought we could have. It means that things do move forward for some, but it also means that we can do more of the Safe Networks program, which we probably thought that would take, maybe we didn't know that it would be as successful as it has been. And because it's been so successful, it's obvious that we would ramp up that kind of work. So it's not about pushing it down. And also, you know, when we think of the original water quality targeted rate with, I can't remember per household what it worked out to be. Was it $47 or $60 for the average? Adding $3 is not doubling what we're doing. It's adding 5%. And the idea was that that fixed rate over 10 years was effectively reducing in value because the cost of construction and everything was going up. So although we'd banked in the original package CPI adjustments, the actual worth of the water quality targeted rate was reducing. So we're lifting it at the same amount as the rates, which will show up on your, the bottom of your rates bill won't go up more than 5% for the average homeowner. And the average homeowner is someone who owns a house that's about 1,080,000 on their CV, not what it's worth, but their CV.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Before we finish this evening, I will give some time to Councillor Simpson, perhaps, just to give us a bit of a financial overview as well. I'm sure that she will have some things she wants to say there. Does anybody else want to add to the comments that Councillor Hills has just made?
I wouldn't mind. I think Councillor Hills is right. There's a lot more work to do than just the 30-year plan we had to start with, but that's how long you plan for with infrastructure plans. So you're required to plan for at least 30 years, but of course, a lot of our infrastructure will last longer, and we like to think probably out in the 50 at least year time scale. So that 30-year plan was what we thought we could do in 30 years. Now with the extra money, we hope to do that in 10, but it's always good to keep bringing in other things we think are really critical. And I also remember that we might have 5% increase on our rates, but the cost of construction is increasing at a way higher percentage every year. At some points, it's like 15% a year. So even this won't meet all the things we'd like to do, but it will help us kind of keep a bit more apace with construction costs and the other things we really need to do.
Thanks, Councillor. Andrew, did you want to add anything to the conversation at this point? Oh, sorry, Andrew Chin. Andrew, yes.
Yeah, I concur with Richard and Linda. You know, the big thing for us is this: if the increase goes through this long-term plan, we really get started within the next 3 years. We can accelerate our program and accelerate the delivery in the next 3 years, and it sort of locks in some of those big programs of work. Before, you know, there's a lot of change coming on the horizon. There's more LTPs, there's water reforms and things like this. So having that certainty of program in the next 3 years helps us get that momentum and keeping the delivery and action happening on the ground. So that's very important for us.
Thanks very much. Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to comment on that? Councillor Hills, how do climate change and water quality work well together as a package?
Yeah, so they're both connected, like most of our, you know, if you think of our transport budget, it's connected. Over half of our transport budget is public transport. That helps reduce our emissions. Same with the natural environment targeted rate. That's all about biodiversity, protecting, getting pests out of our native forest when the climate changes and was able to increase infestation there. The water quality targeted rate is similar. It's about protecting our assets and planning for the future when we see the changes from sea level rise or inundation, or we know that, say in the Wairoa estuary, that how we can do some greener infrastructure potentially over time to reduce the stormwater outflows out through the estuary there. So the water quality infrastructure we're doing now is a lot different to what we used to. So on top of what we do, like the water quality target rate is only one piece of the wide ranging budgets we have for water. And our climate package that is within the budget is another $150 million worth of initiatives on top of what we're already doing in that space. So that's everything from electric buses. Those electric buses will help over time reduce the types of carcinogens and things that go into our waterways because they're not belching diesel. We'll have the urban ngahere work, which is 11,000 mature trees that mostly go on our berms, as well as 200 hectares of native bush and about 200,000 new seedlings a year. And that will go into planting around our waterways, around our streets, to help reduce that stormwater overflows into our rivers and waterways and beaches. So it's all connected, but you know, a lot of people will figure that out themselves. Others won't. But there's so much in the climate package that I could go on with, you know, our recycling centres. That's going to over time reduce our waste to landfill. Our landfills do have an impact on our waterways. So it's all about those co-benefits as well as the climate benefits that comes from it. So we are asking people to also support the other parts of the budget because they do all connect to improving and restoring the modi of our waterways and our beaches and coasts.
Sure, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Coombe, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I think that's a very good summary from our chair of the Environment and Climate Change Committee, and particularly the point around how everything is interrelated, and so we really want to get across the line the support for the overall package of the recovery budget that includes, for the very first time, dedicated funding for climate action, as well as this water quality targeted rate. So really important to give us feedback on all of the priorities, not just the targeted rate.
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Simpson, I'd like to come to you now. I'm sure that as the conversation has been going through, you've probably been building up some points that you want to make as chair of the Finance and Reporting Committee, perhaps, but also as the ward councillor you are. So over to you.
Thanks, Greg. Look, I think we've heard we know what the problem is, and we've heard what we want to do. I think it's about how people can then have their say and help and really get an understanding of what it's going to cost them. You know, what we've heard of what's in it for them. Now, how does that really work? So just to put the whole thing in context, obviously the LTP covers a lot of things, not just water. You know, we have 5 key issues around general investment, responding to climate change, responding to housing and growth, investment in community, protecting and enhancing the environment. And with all those priorities, there comes an associated rates package. And the proposal is 5% in the first year and then 3.5% for the remaining years. Now that initial 5% sort of equals a great big $900 million investment in the first 3 years. So there's 2 ways of helping water that people can respond to help water. The first is if they support the 5% general rates rise in year 1 and the 3.5% thereafter, it delivers a 62% increase in capital expenditure for water, both supply, wastewater and stormwater. So it's up from 7.1 billion in the last LTP to 11.5 billion. It's the biggest increase that of all the topics, okay? So of our total capital investment in this LTP, we now go from 27% to 37% just for water. So what will we do? We've heard about the big projects, but we will also actively replace our below the ground pipe network before it fails. We've seen it fail in Wellington, haven't we? But we want to be proactive around that. So what the 5%, it gives us the ability, and then the next 2 years, in the first 3 years, to do 50% of that with a focus on Central Auckland. Why Central Auckland? Because one of the oldest parts of Auckland, and of course, you know, someone said before, why is so much in the central area? Well, that's where Auckland started. We got better as time went on about delivering the right sort of infrastructure below the ground than we did when Auckland was first started. We'll also increase our leak detection work because, you know, you need to know where to find them. And if we don't get that 5%, without that 5%, almost all that planned local network pipe renewals would have to be deferred. We'd not be able to keep our water infrastructure up fast enough to meet new residential growth areas, and the water supply resilience would be reduced. So there's a real big difference if we don't take on that 5%. That's out of the general rate. Then we move into the water quality targeted rate, and we've talked a lot about the options around that. Now, this rate, as been said earlier tonight, has been going for, 3 years, but it's based on the capital value. It's not a set fee. I actually think it should be a set fee, but that's another story. It's based on the capital value of your home. So every area plays a slightly different amount of money because of course the capital values in every board area of Auckland is slightly different. So we've heard about what we've already spent it on, and we've heard what it can be spent it on. But the great thing about a targeted rate is that it's not spent on the chief executive of Auckland Council's salary, and it's not spent on transport. It's only spent on improving water quality. All right. So there are two main options in the Have Your Say form. There's a number of options, and I'll get to them all, but the two main options are continue it over the 10 years, which is what the NEAR first suggested. And that is, in other words, because we're taking a third LTP on top of the second LTP, we've already got 7 years, you know, of the water quality targeted rate. So extending it out for the last 3 years of the 10-year program, and people would just pay exactly what they're paying now. All right, so the average is $66, and it would go up to $69 for the average ratepayer. Now it does change. Now we had a question from someone from Franklin earlier tonight, and in the urban part of Franklin they only pay $42 for the water quality targeted rate out there, and yet they'll get benefit the same as someone who might pay a lot higher because their CV is different. So their water quality change is only $2, but the average change is actually $3.30, all right, for people. So so you could have no change, and then you wouldn't get the extra stuff, or you can go with the change, the extension and the increase. And it was that increase we saw, that extra, those big quality, those big ticket items, Eastern Isthmus, the Manukau, and as we've said, with the increase, every local board benefits. So what's that increase? What will that cost you? As I've said, $3.30 for the average residential ratepayer in year one. And if you add that $3.30 onto the 5% average general rate, what's that total bill? How much will your rates go up from this year to next year? The answer to that question is $150 for the average ratepayer. And that means a 5% general rate increase, a 5% water quality targeted rate increase, and there's a little bit extra in there in the old Auckland City Council area and the Manukau City Council area for rubbish. So if we look at the highest residential rate paying ward in the city, and that's mine, what does that look like? In other words, what's almost the worst it could be with the 5% general rate and the 5% water quality targeted rate? That increase is $245 for the Ōrākei ward. My neighbouring ward, where Councillor Coombe comes from, is $147. It's a little bit below. For Richard and Kaipātiki, it's $139. That's from $139 more than the rates on average for that board area, from the rates they're paying this year to what we're proposing. So although tonight's been all about water, and I'm not going to say only, because, you know, $150 is $150, but we've talked about the huge benefits for water, and there is no doubt that this LTP is heavily weighted towards improving water, its supply, its resilience, stormwater, wastewater separation, and the whole work. And I think, you know, we're very lucky. We've got some fantastic people at Auckland Council, Andrew Chin and his team, fantastic people working this through. Something needs to be done urgently. We cannot have health risk signs on our waterways. And what we're doing is saying, we agree with that, and here's our proposal. It's now up to you, Aucklanders, to have your say. So either online or in hard copy, you will see this form. The first question is on the average rates increase, and I'll let maybe Andrew Duncan can say a little bit more than the other things that we're doing in the LTP very shortly. But if you support that 5%, if you support that increase, that 5%, knowing that it will cost you 150 with the water quality targeted rate added on as well, you would pick support. So the options there are support, do not, you can't, support, do not support, other, or don't know. I'm going to leave climate change. We've had a webinar on climate change already, and I'm going to jump down to the section on water quality. So the questions it asks, what is your opinion on this proposal? Do you support the extension and the increase? Do you support the extension only? Do you not support either change, other, or don't know? Remember, the extension and the increase is really the one that delivers the most benefit over the 10 years. The extension only means like the big projects that we've talked about, the Manukau, the Eastern Isthmus, don't start for 6 years. So if you're happy to have health risk warnings in our waterways for another 6 years and for nothing to happen, you just support the extension. So my message to Aucklanders is please have your say. It's important that we hear from you. We want to know whether you think water quality is important. We want you to understand what it will cost you, and we want to know what you think about our proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thanks very much. Andrew Chin, anything that you just want to add in wrapping up?
Look, I think Desley summarised it beautifully. I would just add that we do read all your feedback. My team, so a lot of people think that when they provide feedback to council, it goes into a black hole, but all of those comments, all of the feedback, we read it and summarise it, and we do try and pick out the ideas and respond to it. So we welcome any type of feedback, even the critical feedback, we still read it.
Kia ora, Andrew, thank you. And Andrew Duncan, anything from you that you think you just want to emphasise?
So as Andrew pointed out, all the feedback is worked through very carefully. Councillors pay close attention to that. But it's not just restricted to the, as you said earlier, Greg, it's not just restricted to feedback on the specific questions. It's an opportunity. There are some other things in our consultation document beyond the 5 questions. We're looking for your feedback on that. That will be considered. And it's an opportunity for you in the community to let us know about the issues that are concerning you, so the councillors can consider that and looking ahead for the next 10 years.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Cooper, anything that you'd like to add as we...
Councillor Simpson summed up everything really well, but I guess one of the things I want to say is if people have got any doubts about the sharing around and the value they get, we just must remember that, as Councillor Simpson said, some of this big work that needed to be done, like the Central Interceptor in Auckland City, wasn't done. So there wasn't a lot of debt there, but a lot of the other councils, including Waitakere, took debt into the region. So everybody's been paying that off. We did a lot of that work, but the rest of the region has helped us pay off that debt. And also, the Central Interceptor is really good for the Waitemata, but the people that pay the highest rates live on the Waitemata, so they are actually paying their fair share for that interceptor. Thank you very much, people from Ōrākei. So I think, we've got to think about it in that context, that though a lot of us didn't want to amalgamate, as Councillor Coombs said earlier, the only reason we can take on this big debt, take on this huge project, is we've joined together as everybody from the Auckland region. And without a doubt, if it came to it, with our back against the wall, all Aucklanders would unite. And so I think we all have to do that and look at it from a wider perspective. I know as regional councillors, we have to do that, and that's tough when you come from your local area. But as we've said before, every local board area will have projects. So every local board knows what their projects are. So we'll benefit, everybody will benefit. And the bottom line here is we all love our water that surrounds this beautiful city and region. Thank you.
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you very much. Councillor Hills, anything that you would like to say in wrapping up?
No, I think everyone's covered it all really. And I guess the hard thing, well, I don't actually find it hard anymore. I think I did as a new councillor last term, is that whole local focus. We are getting a lot done on the North Shore as a local North Shore councillor, but I'm also the chair of a committee, and we are working together, and we actually have worked on this budget with consensus. It's, I think, 20 out of 21 voted for this budget to go out in the way it is, and 18 out of 21 voted for our emergency budget last year, the most difficult budget we've ever had to do, with over $1 billion of loss in revenue over the next couple of years. But I think, you know, looking at some councils around the country who are falling apart, who are getting commissioners, who are having to put up 17, 23 in Canterbury, 14%, 9% in Hamilton, 9% in Dunedin. We've managed to do this budget on consensus. We know it's not easy for people with increasing costs, but we are one of the lowest rate rises while also increasing our spend. I looked at water spend. We are spending way more than almost any other council, and our increase is far greater than any other council based on a per capita amount in the water infrastructure and water quality space. So with a 5% rate rise, which is lower than almost anywhere else in the country, we are still doing a whole lot more, and there's a lot more to be done. And we can keep blaming the past, but we actually have to look to the future and just do it. So we're asking for as much feedback as possible. We know it's difficult for some, but we have to do this, otherwise the cost is put onto the next generation, as we're finding out now with some of those big projects that we're glad to be doing now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Coombe has let me know that she has nothing to add at this point. She's agreed with all the summings up. So it is time now to pass the baton to the people of Auckland. So the elected members this evening have really made the case for us all to consider the options. And here goes Councillor Simpson. She's holding it up. We now have to do our job. We all have to read the options. We have to look at the 10-year budget plan, the recovery budget, and just look at the different topics, and also just think about those interconnections between some of them and put our feedback in. Our feedback, so you're online, everybody watching, so I guess you've found where you need to be. You go to https://akhaveyoursay.aucklandcouncil.govt.nz. All the information there is around how to engage. There are lots of ways to put in feedback. You can visit a library or council service centre to see printed information as well. Feedback on the 10-year budget must be received by 12 noon on the 22nd of March. 12 noon on the 22nd of March, using one or more of the options that we have to have our say. Please remember that the recording from tonight, including Andrew's presentation, is going to be available online. And remember that if we've missed a question, because sometimes when they're coming in, we skip over one just accidentally, the questions will all be answered and they will be sent to experts to be answered, and then the answers will pop up online as well. Now, I see the link has gone out to AK Have Your Say, has been messaged out to you, so you can pick it up there. There's another webinar on Sunday, so if you want to be a good citizen on Sunday evening, you can tune into the webinar about rates. That's at 6 p.m, same deal as tonight, and the same thing, please remember to use the Q&A function to pop in your questions. I'd like to say thank you to the panelists this evening. It's been a really engaging conversation, lots of detail, lots of vision, and heaps to think about. So thank you. And I'm sure that on behalf of the panelists, I can say thank you to everybody who's been sending in questions and who spent time this evening. This is a time for us all now to go and tell our friends that these are topics that they need to care about for all of us. And so thank you, everybody. Kia ora tātou. Best wishes. Go well. Ka kite.